If you've ever felt like religion did more harm than good, if you've ever been wounded, silenced, or even shamed in the name of God, you're not the first, and sadly, you won't be the last. But what if the problem isn't Jesus, but what people have done in his name? Christianity presents itself as a message and mission of love, grace, humility, and hope. And yet, in the eyes of many, it has come to represent something entirely different. For countless people, Christianity is not good news. It's a source of pain, a tool of control, even a system of oppression. And it's not hard to understand why. History is filled with examples of the church's failure to reflect the heart of Christ. The Crusades, the Inquisition, complicity in slavery and colonialism, the subjugation of women, the silence of the church during times when it should have spoken, and in more recent years, cover-ups of clergy sexual abuse, teachings that shield predators instead of protecting vulnerable women and children, and institutions that have twisted the Bible to silence injured people rather than stand up for them. These are not just regrettable moments. They're deep, soul-wounding betrayals. So the question is natural to ask, has Christianity been hijacked by power? The truth is, yes and no. The most honest answer is layered. Yes, Christianity has at times been twisted into something it was never meant to be. When the church aligns itself too closely with political dominance, cultural supremacy, or institutional pride, it strays far from the humble path of Jesus. In those moments, the gospel gets buried beneath ambition, image, and control. But these distortions, no matter how widespread or visible they are not the real thing. They are not Christianity as defined by its founder. Jesus opposed oppression. Jesus himself was no friend of religious power gone wrong. His harshest words were not for secular rulers or outsiders. They were aimed at religious leaders, especially men who used God's name to manipulate, elevate themselves, and weigh people down with unbearable burdens. In Matthew 23, verse 4, Jesus says of them, "They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to help." That's not Jesus supporting religious control. That's a scathing indictment of it. And Jesus didn't just speak against oppressive religion, he modeled the opposite. He brought a gospel of freedom. From the very start of his ministry, Jesus positioned himself as a liberator and giver of care. In Luke 4, verse 18, quoting the prophet Isaiah, Jesus declared, "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me to proclaim good news to the poor, liberty to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed." This wasn't just poetic language. It was his personal mission statement. Jesus lived this out in radical ways. He touched contagious lepers, people the religious elite avoided. He welcomed women into his inner circle and treated them with dignity in a world that did the opposite. He welcomed and blessed children, defended the outcast, and forgave those that society deemed unforgivable. His inner circle of friends included former prostitutes, crooks, and those who had once been demon-possessed. He healed on the Sabbath, not to rebel, but to confront systems that prioritized rules over people. He entered Jerusalem not on a war horse, but on a donkey, signaling humility, not conquest. He washed his disciples' feet, turning the world's view of leadership upside down. And in his final act, Jesus laid down his own life, not as a victim of power, but as a voluntary offering to confront the very powers that corrupt and destroy. King Jesus didn't seize control. He surrendered it. He didn't dominate, he served. He didn't retaliate, he forgave. And then the early church then walked this same path. Before Christians had any cultural or political power, they were often hunted, mocked, and martyred. Yet they built countercultural communities defined by generosity, hospitality, and sacrificial love. They adopted abandoned infants, elevated women not only into membership, but leadership, and broke down social, economic, and political divisions. Galatians 3, verse 28 proclaims something unheard of in the Roman world, that there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. This wasn't just theological poetry. It was a cultural revolution, a dismantling of the old hierarchies in favor of a new way of being human and living in community. So the truth is, Christians have failed and have also reformed. It's true, Christians have failed to live up to their own ideals, but that failure does not invalidate the faith. If anything, the gap between what Christianity teaches and how it's sometimes been practiced should send us running back to Christ, not away from him. History is filled with faithful dissenters, those who loved the church enough to call it back to its true identity. When slavery was justified in Christian language, it was believers like Hannah More and Oluda Equiano who led the charge for abolition. More wrote poems and essays that stirred hearts and minds. Equiano published a memoir that helped awaken the nation's conscience. They weren't outsiders critiquing Christianity. They were insiders embodying it. Today, the same thing is happening. Esau McCauley calls for racial healing from a biblical foundation. International Justice Mission fights modern-day slavery with boots-on-the-ground resolve. Churches across the world provide refuge for immigrants, advocate for survivors, and walk with the wounded. When Christianity is abused, the remedy isn't to abandon it. The remedy is to recover it. As Dorothy Sayers said, the best remedy for a crooked stick is not to throw it away, but to use it to point straight. This is why true Christianity's legacy is good. Christianity's track record isn't all bad. It has also been the seedbed for immense good. The idea that rulers are subject to a higher law came from Christian teaching. The earliest hospitals and orphanages were started by believers. Modern education systems trace their roots to monasteries and cathedral schools. The value of charity, now a global virtue, was revolutionized by a man who said, "Whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me." And that was, of course, Jesus. Even the separation of church and state, often used to guard against religious abuse, has a Christian origin. It was Jesus who said, "Render to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's." In the 2nd century, Tertullian, an early church father, boldly declared, "It is a fundamental human right that every person should worship according to his or her own convictions." Religious freedom didn't begin with the Enlightenment. It began with Jesus. At its heart, Christianity is not coercion, it's invitation. In John 7:37, Jesus says, "If anyone thirsts, let that person come to me and drink." No force, no manipulation, just grace and welcome. The gospel doesn't enslave people, it frees them. It doesn't impose, it invites. It doesn't guilt you into compliance, it transforms you from the inside out. Yes, there's a paradox. You gain your life from losing it. You become free by surrendering. But like the strings of a guitar, it's in the tension that music is made. Alignment with Christ is not a cage. It's the condition for freedom. And so, has Christianity been a tool of oppression? Yes, when it ceased to be truly Christian, when it lost itself, when it forgot its own identity. But when it's faithful to Jesus, it becomes an unmatched force for freedom, dignity, justice, and healing. The real Jesus did not grab power. He gave it up. And his true followers do the same. The gospel critiques all forms of injustice. It holds leaders accountable. It lifts up the lowly. It breaks down dividing walls. And it does all of this not through domination, but through sacrificial love. So, if you've ever been hurt by religion, Jesus was too. He confronted it in his own day. And he invites you not into shame or silence, but into the rest, healing, and life that he has for you.